Hello, everyone, and welcome to Soul Stained Ink. My name is Beth. This is Tennessee Whiskey, and we are here today to give you recommendations for my pathway for middle grade May. Yes, we are. Yeah. My pathway is cottagecore, and it's all about nature. So I have a stack here. Hi. Yeah. That has to do with just that. And since Whiskey has decided she needs to be a part of this, let's start with my final prompt, which is a book or books that have cryptids or animals that might be making noise at night. Now, I would love to show you a copy of The Cryptid Hunters. I have the first book, and it would be perfect for this, but I can't find it. My child has stolen it, which is fine because I stole two books from her to show to you. These are The Great Pet Heist and The Great Ghost Hoax. These are pets that live in an apartment complex, and they get up to all sorts of hijinks. So this first one, the Great Pet Heist, the back says, Butterbean knew she wasn't always a good dog, still she'd never considered herself a bad dog until the morning that her owner, Mrs. Food, fell in the hallway. Admittedly, the tile was slippier than usual, mostly because Butterbean had just thrown up on it. Now Butterbean and her fellow pets have to come up with a grand plan to support themselves in case Mrs. Food is unable to keep taking care of them. When they discover a mysterious man in their building who seems to have lots of loot, they plan a heist. Oscar, the Mina bird, is the brains of the operation. Walt, the cat, has the necessary slyness and slink. Marco and Polo are the reconnaissance rats, and Butterbean, well, no one would ever suspect a cute little wiener dog. Can these animal friends pull off the heist of the century? And they're sneaking through ductwork and things like that. And then the second one, I'm not going to read the whole back to you, but the first line on the back says Butterbean is bored. In this book, Mrs. Third Floor is convinced that there's a ghost in the building and the pets decide to have some fun. So those would work well with animals making noises. Then we have Treasure Island. Oh, nope. That's I Survived. Where'd Treasure Island go? Here we go. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, which has all sorts of creepiness and is out in the middle of the ocean and on islands. So it would definitely count for a couple of my prompts. And then When a Ghost Talks, Listen. This is the second in a series by Tim Tingle. I would show you the first book, which is When I Became a Ghost. However, both of my copies of that are currently loaned out to students. So you'll have to make do with this one. However, this is a series of middle grade stories based off of Choctaw lore. And so this would work as a fairy tale or folklore retelling, as well as animals that are making noise in the night. And it covers when they are on the Trail of Tears. So, a hike. This would definitely do that. And it's pretty short. All right. Speaking of a short novel, the I Survived novels, most of them, or at least a whole lot of them, have to do with nature. Like this, I Survived the Shark Attacks of 1916. And they are very short. So those would work. We also have Old Yeller, who could have face. This is fairly short. They're in the middle of nowhere. Animals making noises. All right. So my prompts, I don't think I said this at the beginning. My prompts were a fairy tale or folklore type retelling, because folklore fairy tales tend to take place in nature, or with talking animals or whatever. Cryptids or animals making noise at night, taking a hike through a natural setting. So stories set in the natural world, and then a short hike, which is a short book. So this, The Door of No Return by Kwame Alexander. This is a retelling of sorts of folklore. I'm throwing books all over the place. It is a retelling of sorts of folklore, and historical documents. Now, this is an upper middle grade, young adult, and it hits kind of hard at some points because it is about a boy and his life in his village, and then all of a sudden he ends up on a slave ship. So it does hit pretty hard at some points, but it is really, really awesome. It's so well done. Kwame does amazingly. It is a novel inspired by history based off the real lives of the Ashanti people who are native to a region of West Africa now known as Ghana. So it is based off historical evidence, stories, and folklore passed down by those people. This would work for just being out in nature, and the villages are obviously in the middle of nature. There's a lot of nature walks in it. They're also on the ocean. And I will take like historical fiction, like based off of facts. That is definitely something that could be a retelling. Speaking of, we've got My Face to the Wind, The Diary of Sarah Jane Price, a prairie teacher from Broken Bow, Nebraska in 1881. This goes with the I Survived situation where they're fairly short. They are historically based novels, and they are mostly set in small towns in the country, things of that nature. Another folklore retelling. This is not, in fact, based in history. Tristan Strong is very much a modern day. The first book, he's 7th grader. Second book, he's going into 8th, or is in 8th. But anyway, he goes through a lot of trauma, and then he finds out that he has essentially ripped open a hole between his world and the world of African American folklore, because he broke a ghost bottle, let out a spirit, and he goes into mid-pass and he has to help rescue. Just read it. If you haven't read Tristan Strong, it's a trilogy. Read all of them. That's all I got to say. I'm not. Just do it. Just do it. Whiskey came back. All right. And she wants to help me show you. Yep. This one. This is Inside Out and Back Again by Thanhale. This is the story of Ha, who lived in Saigon and, or right outside of Saigon. And the Vietnam War has reached her home. She and her family were forced to flee as Saigon falls. They board a ship headed toward Hope. They end up in America, and she and her family are in Alabama. And it's just a very interesting story of like how they get there. There are a lot of descriptions of the nature around their home in Saigon, and then how it's so different in Alabama, and the strangeness of everything, and how her family kind of falls apart and comes back together. This is another one that is a novel in verse. So the Door of No Return is also a novel in verse. Most of Kwame's are. And they are fairly quick. And both of those are just amazing books. So if you haven't read Inside Out and Back Again, that is another one that could go for, honestly, almost any of our prompts. Like there's a long voyage, there are animals, there's nature. If you want to go for something that's not in a forest but is in the middle of nature, Holes by Louis Sakar is definitely one where they are in the middle of the desert digging a hole. They're out there. We also have Esperanza Rising by Pam Muniz Ryan. This is an oldie but a goodie. I actually only read it for the first time last summer. Absolutely adored it. May actually reread it this summer. It's just that good. There's a reason why this is known as a modern classic. So Esperanza lived on her family's ranch in Mexico, and through a series of unfortunate events, she, her mom, her abuelita, no, not her abuelita. Her abuelita ends up having to stay behind, but she and her mom, and then like their servants who she had grown up with, they were like closest family, but still servants. They all end up having to flee to California, and they're settling in a camp for Mexican farm workers. And so Esperanza was always like the princess, and she's having to learn how to work and do all these things. And it's really, really good. And it talks about the land in Mexico, and they had a ranch that's like this big open land. Talks about their travels to get to California, and talks about them living on this farm, which is cabins in the middle of a field, basically, and about picking. And it's really, really good. And I think that it would work well with my take a hike prompt. Let's see. I put the books I'd already talked about with the books I had not talked about. So here we go. I've got 2 more, and these are going to be a bit of a stretch, but I want you to hear me out, okay? So this one, What's His Face by Gordon Corman. Whiskey helped me out with this one. I don't know what her deal is, but she really likes chewing on books. And it's really, really, really going to get her kicked out of the family if she keeps doing it. I know she's only 9.5 months old, but anyway, What's His Face by Gordon Corman. Now, this book, upon first glance, you would go, this is not anything Cottage Corey, right? Like, kid lives in town. It's all about 7th grade year, and he's just moved. And his brand new cell phone. Well, his brand new cell phone is haunted by the ghost of a 14-year-old apprentice from the late 16th, early 17th century who swears on all that is holy that he, in fact, wrote the original script to Romeo and Juliet, and he died of the plague, and William Shakespeare stole his play. Now, this kid, What's His Face? It's always been his name. His name is What's His Face because nobody learns his name because his dad is in the military. And they move every year. And every year they get a new present. And his present this year is like this super high-tech military grade cell phone. Then all of a sudden his phone starts to glitch. And it's right around the time that he finds out that A, the 7th grade always puts on a Shakespeare play, and this year it is Romeo and Juliet. And B, the town always does this because there is this like millionaire obsessed with Shakespeare that lives in the middle of town and has like this private museum of a bunch of Shakespeare stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Then Rodney shows up in his phone. The phone's not glitching out. It's actually a ghost. And Cooper does go on a couple of escapades where he's like out riding his bike through the woods, down gravel pathways, etc. But also, this has a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, and while it is not particularly folklore in and of itself, Shakespeare based most of his plays on folklore or the oral tradition. He utilized a mixture of folk tales and religious and political things that were happening around them, because most of his audiences would have been illiterate at the time. So the stories they knew that would give them a buy-in and help them to understand the plays that were happening would be things that were common knowledge. Folk tales, myths, legends. But, by the way, myths and legends are folk tales. They're folk tales. Anyway, I won't go on a whole I'm an English teacher and a PhD in children's literature kick right now. But if you would like me to go off on a tangent about that, let me know in the comments and I'll make a video about all the different kinds. But anyway, this retelling of Romeo and Juliet, that counts. Shakespeare, like I said, utilized folklore and the oral tradition to create long-lasting plays that his audience would be able to understand and have a buy-in for. And then finally, this one is a much longer stretch. And this author has a couple of other books that might be better choices for my particular pathway in middle grade May. However, this is my favorite of her works. This is The Science of Breakable Things by Ty Keller. You can see that I tabbed it up. I'm just going to open randomly to one of the tabs here. Mom was in the kitchen when I went downstairs this morning, sifting flour into a mixing bowl. Her hair was washed. She was wearing her favorite sundress, the one with blue stars. Good morning, she said, smiling as if this were any other day, as if she did this all the time. Her voice was almost normal, just slightly blurry. I felt like I was listening to a recording of her with a slight static humming in the background, and I ignored the static. Happy Thanksgiving, I chirped and practically skipped up next to her. If she was pretending to be happy, so would I. So this follows Natalie, who is a 7th grader from the beginning of her 7th grade year. And her science teacher says that everyone in the class must answer an important question using the scientific method. But Natalie, her mom is a botanist and she's suffering from severe depression. So the question that's important to Natalie is, how do you grow a miracle? When Mr. Neely suggests that Natalie enters the egg drop competition, she has hope. Eggs are breakable, but hope is not. She has a secret plan to use the prize money to inspire her mother to love life again. Because when parents are breakable, it's up to the kids to save them, right? So this is about hope, love, miracles, mental health. This was Ty Keller's first. So How to Trap a Tiger would probably fit my pathway better, and it's an amazing book, and you should totally read that too. But The Science of Breakable Things can fit as well because Mom is a botanist, and there is a certain type of flower that Natalie is trying to find or get her mom to go on an expedition for, during this novel. It follows the scientific method. You get journal entries. So September 25th, assignment number 4, plants are people too. So while this is not exactly a typical piece that would fit any of the prompts at their most basic level, I think this would actually fit 3 out of 4, if not all. And I just highly suggest that everybody read this book. It is absolutely gorgeously written. Ty Keller is one of my favorite middle grade authors, and I think that if you gave it a shot, she'd probably be one of yours too. So those are a big stack of possibilities, recommendations for you guys with my particular grouping of prompts. I can't wait to see what y'all pick, whose paths you take, how you're hopping between things, because you can take a day pass. So even if you didn't choose my path, if you want to head on over and pick one of these books and use one of my prompts, go for it. I myself am going to attempt to take on everybody's pathways and just have a grand old time tripping around all my friends' prompts. So I hope to see you out there. Let me know down below if you've read any of these, want to read any of these, if you've picked your own path already, if you're joining us. You might not be joining us. As long as you read one middle grade book throughout the month of May, you're solid gold. But let me know all those things down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I will talk to you again soon. Until next time, stay safe out there, guys.